What would happen if I told you that Leclerc's car was never perfect, and that Hamilton showed it with data? What if he told you that Ferrari was involuntarily sabotaging his own star without knowing it? All that changed after Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan was much more than a Grand Prix for Lewis Hamilton and Ferrari. It was a breakdown. Until then, the doubts were internal, the comments were handled with discretion, and the differences of performance were attributed, at least for the public, to the logical adaptation curve that implied the change of team. But in Baku, all these underground tensions collapsed in a weekend loaded with technical revelations, accumulated frustration, and a discovery that would shake Maranello's foundations. From the first free session, something did not fit. Hamilton could not find balance in the car. The SF25 responded awkwardly to each correction, showed survival in slow curve inputs, and a worrying lack of traction at the exit of them. High asphalt temperatures amplified all defects. But this time it was not abstract sensations. This time Hamilton had evidence. At the end of the race, the post-Great Prize analysis was relentless. When reviewing the telemetry data, constant irregularities were found in the hybrid SF25 hybrid system. In critical acceleration moments, the power deployment of the MGUK unity responsible for delivering electricity to the rear axle was inconsistent. The losses, although intermittent, were significant, between 10 and 20 horsepower less, just when the car more needed them. The most alarming thing was that these failures did not activate alerts in real time. The system simply degraded silently, which made it almost impossible to detect it in the middle of a session. Until that time, a good part of Ferrari's environment had blamed the lack of performance to a bad adaptation of the British. But Baku tried otherwise. Hamilton's car was not only different from that of Leclerc in behavior, it was also in real operation. It was not the pilot who was failing. It was the machine. The situation became even more critical when the data revealed another fundamental failure. The SF25 braking system was calibrated with a thermal margin too narrow. In urban conditions such as Baku, where the brakes cool less due to the lack of long lines, temperatures shot over 1000 degrees Celsius. That generated a partial crystallization on the front discs, causing vibrations and loss of prolonged braking efficiency. On a track with a few meters away, any loss of control could be catastrophic. But the worst was yet to come to light. In the technical review between the second free session and the classification, Hamilton engineers detected an unexpected change in the rear axle conduction height. A parameter so sensitive that directly affects the stability of the car in rapid curves and aerodynamic efficiency. The pilot had not requested any adjustment. Your track engineer either. So who had done it? The answer fell like a bomb. Ferrari Central Performance Group, a technical division with operational autonomy, had modified that configuration without communicating it to the Hamilton team. It was not a workshop error. It was a decision made by a department that acts in parallel, but that weekend violated the internal operating standards. The result was devastating. All the tuning work carried out by Hamilton and its surroundings during the practices was cancelled. And what is more serious, that alteration directly affected the pilot's confidence in the car. This episode was more than an engineering error. It was a painful exhibition of communication and hierarchy problems within Ferrari. A team that historically has sinned excess internal compartmentalization, again showed the cracks of an organization where decisions do not always flow vertically or consistently. For Hamilton, this was unacceptable. The 7-time world champion is no stranger to high-pressure environments. In Mercedes, he had built a relationship where the pilot was not only heard, but his feedback was the basis of technical development. In Ferrari, on the other hand, he had just discovered that his voice, no matter how respected it was publicly, could be operationally ignored. And that meant not only had to win races, I had to change the culture of an entire team. After the Azerbaijan GP, Hamilton did not speak with euphemisms. He presented an exhaustive technical report, documented each of the anomalies suffered during the weekend. He detailed software failures, calibration errors, cooling problems, and above all, the intervention not authorized in the car settings. He asked for answers, but even more, he demanded changes. That night in Ferrari's meeting room, the atmosphere was crisis, but also of opportunity. For the first time, they faced a truth they had avoided accepting. Their structure needed a reform. And Hamilton, with his experience, with his obsession with detail, with his ability to undress the deficiencies of an organization, had just offered them the first real map of what they had to fix. What happened in Ferrari during the Azerbaijan Grand Prix cannot be understood only from the technical. What was revealed that weekend was a deep fracture in the internal structure of the team. One that exposed not only operational errors, but a fragmented work model, where the different departments functioned as isolated entities, with their own agendas and without a clear centralized direction. For Lewis Hamilton, this was more than a frustration. It was a betrayal. It all started with a seemingly lower variation, a change in the rear conduction height of the SF-25. In any other context, it could have gone unnoticed. But in Formula One, a single millimeter of difference can completely alter the behavior of the car. This modification, made between free training and classification, was executed without prior knowledge of its track engineer and, most serious, without notification to the pilot himself. An act that violated the basic operational practices of any elite team. The Central Performance Group, a technical division within Ferrari in charge of maximizing the global performance of the car, had unilaterally decided to make this adjustment. They did it based on internal simulations that suggested a possible braking stability gain and better aerodynamic load transfer in high-speed curves. But what they did not calculate was the impact it would have on the specific tuning that Hamilton had worked for days. That lowest rear height completely changed the balance of the car, altering its dynamic behavior, traction, stability when braking, and even the efficiency of the tires. The car that Hamilton had refined, curve per curve, no longer existed. The effect was immediate and devastating. In classification, the SF-25 became unpredictable. The rear train lost adhesion in intermediate phases of curve, forcing Hamilton to modify its traced, compromise the braking, and in many cases abort fast laps. The loss of confidence was total. And in a sport where the pilot needs to feel the car as an extension of his body, that disconnection translates into tenths of a second. Tenths that in F1 make the difference between fighting for pole or falling into Q2. But the problem was not just a technician. It was human. It was organizational. The decision of the Central Performance Group not only violated internal protocols, but also exposed an operational culture that prioritized the theoretical analysis above the real feedback of the pilot. Instead of working as a cohesive team, Ferrari behaved as a set of disconnected silos, where decisions were made in laboratories far from the box, without listening to the man who had to take that car to the limit. When Hamilton and his direct team discovered what happened, there was no room for diplomacy. The pilot demanded immediate explanations. How was it possible that such critical modifications were made without your knowledge? Who had authorized that change? And why hadn't he been consulted, when all the tuning revolved around his sensations behind the wheel? For the first time since the arrival of Hamilton, it became clear that if Ferrari wanted to win championships again, it was not enough to have a fast car. They had to become a disciplined, transparent, and capable organization in real time to what their star pilot detected on the track. After the storm in Azerbaijan, Ferrari had no choice but to look in. What had happened could not be minimized as a simple communication error. It was the palpable evidence of a broken model, and most importantly, it was the exact moment in which Lewis Hamilton ceased to be a new signing to become the support point on which the Scuderia would begin to redefine itself. What followed was a process of deep transformation, perhaps not immediate in the visible, but decisive in the background. Ferrari, pushed by the political, technical, and media force of Hamilton, was forced to rebuild from within. The first major consequence was operational. The lines of communication between the Central Performance Group and the track teams were restructured. From that moment on, no change in the configuration of the car could be done without direct approval of the chief engineer of each pilot and the corridor itself. This implied the creation of new protocols, mandatory technical review meetings between sessions, and a settings traceability system where each modified parameter would be registered, signed, and justified. The intention was clear: to prevent the disconnection to sabotage Hamilton in Baku again. In parallel, the conversation about the design of the SF-25 was reopened. What in Maranello was considered a solid evolution of the SF-24 became reanalyzed under new criteria, driven by the observations that Hamilton had been pointing out since pre-season. The engineers began to reconsider aspects such as weight distribution, the response of the hybrid system, the efficiency of the low-temperature brake system, and the interaction between the aerodynamic package and the suspensions. The technical meetings no longer revolved around predictive models by themselves, but how these models were compared to what the pilot reported from the track. Hamilton's subjective experience, based on more than 300 large awards, began despite more than any computer simulation.